Blog Talk Radio.
Well, hello everyone. I'd like to welcome you back to Ohio Exopolitics. I'm your host, Mark Snyder, and of course, we're back in the Billy Meyer case. I've got to go out and get some more guests, but I've got a lot of really interesting information from the Meyer case. And I'm going to quickly cover in the next 15 minutes or so a conversation with Billy and Svoth in 1946 on May 5th. It was interesting at this point. Billy was many times more developed in terms of his consciousness than the boy's own age, and Billy will have to intensively occupy himself with this information that Svoth is going to give him. This discussion will be about the banking system and politics. And, Billy was probably only 5 or 6 years old at this time, which is interesting. There will be an extensive mismanagement of the financial system over time, and many national budgets of many countries cannot be or will not be properly managed. So this financial problem is growing. After World War II, initially, the standard of living rose for some countries very much. Many people incurred debts that they could not afford. Billy's organization continued to be built up. Billy formed a community called FIGU. However, starting in 1988, generally across the world, the financial system started to decline. And there is a shadow government that is formed in the USA. It's expanding across the world. This shadow government is now governing the U.S., and there is another shadow government that exists in the world as well. There is a coming time of great overpopulation, and we are currently well into it. And the actions of the world wars and the misuse of technology continues. Climate and nature is being destroyed, and this is, in fact, because of overpopulation. However, over time, the destruction of the environment will eventually be recognized, and people will start to understand that climate change is triggered by the massive humanity that we have here. We are poisoning the atmosphere. The ozone is diminishing, which is causing changes in the fauna and flora. There are plastic garbage all over the oceans. The plastics were actually developed in Germany a long time ago, and we are discharging plastics into the environment. And this is causing great destruction, particularly with seabirds who ingest a lot of this plastic. And the USA is guilty of much of the destruction of the environment. We are guilty of exploding many nuclear bombs. And the climate change will continue to make itself more obvious because of the destruction, particularly to the forests, because the forests moderate the weather. They keep it warmer in the summer and cooler in the winter. They prevent erosion, and they prevent droughts. The winds that blow over the tops of the trees create a turbulence that eventually results in rain. So the forests have a critical part in our climate, a critical part in the health of the world as a whole. Of course, the animals live in the forest, and the animals also have a purpose. Everything within nature has a purpose, and everything that exists, every tiny plant, every tiny animal fulfills its purpose in love. Love is the highest principle in all creation, and through it everything exists in absolute logic. And it's logical that we need to take care of the environment. Right after World War II, there was something called the Hunger Winter, which resulted in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of human beings. And there were also heat waves that moved through Europe back in 1947. Fruit trees bloomed twice, water levels fell in creeks, lakes, and rivers. Many cattle had to be killed because of lack of water and lack of food. Many farmers were not able to plant their crops. There was a cold wave and then followed by a heat wave. And during the next 5 decades, humanity will not understand that its overpopulation and resulting destruction of nature will continue to cause climate problems. The USA will start to overthrow governments around the world. The U.S. will plunder countries in regard to their natural resources. American world domination will bring death and destruction, and it will cause religious organizations to flourish and terrorism to flourish, and there will be a mighty delusion caused by religion. And in 1944, Swath taught Billy about many of these things. Now, the maintenance of Billy's consciousness. Billy will have to have a continuing interest in literally everything. To know coming events in advance means that his consciousness will be heavily burdened, and there will be things that he knows that will also be of a personal nature. And there are many things that Billy will know which will be repulsive to him. So this ability to look into the future is a great responsibility. It's a two-edged sword. So he still has to struggle to maintain his healthy state of consciousness, and Billy will become very powerful in terms of his thoughts and feelings, and this is why we've been studying the book, The Might of Thoughts, so much. It is a pre-given thing that Billy should not fall into problems related to his consciousness, and he will attain much more knowledge than any earthly study of psychology would be able to give him. This book here, The Might of Thoughts, is better than a PhD in psychology, in my opinion. Billy must bring his thoughts and feelings under control. He will have to endure many difficult things, and he must have strongly controlled thoughts and feelings. There will be attacks on Billy. There are racist organizations and criminals that will attack Billy's organization, and Billy will always be attacked by pastors and priests. I think there's been over 20 attacks on Billy's life. The Secret Services are watching Billy. The rapidly growing overpopulation is one of the causes of terrorism, and the overpopulation is the worst problem that we're facing right now, but people don't realize it yet. Another thing is the coming threat of nuclear weapons. The USA will cause many terrible things across the world. There are civil wars and government collapses that are coming because of what the USA has done. And the might-driven actions of the USA will result in terrorism around the world. America starts atomic bomb tests. I think there have been over 2,000 atomic bomb tests in the world. The threat of nuclear war continues. The nuclear arms race has resulted in more and more false alarms, and these false alarms will rise again and again. There are problems with the detection systems that will continue to cause tensions between countries. NATO is one issue. The inability of the U.S. and the Soviets to come to terms will be another issue. China will be another issue. We're also dealing with the refugee disaster. And there are turmoils and civil wars. There will be about 70 million refugees that will stream across Europe, and they have already caused much destruction in Europe. The governments still do not see the reality of the refugee problems. And the intellectual capacity of many of our rulers is not so good. And the rapidly growing overpopulation will cause more and more human beings to fall prey to religions. The more and more human beings who are religious will fall into a religious delusion. And this will occur in the Western Asia as well as all over the world. These fanatical religions will torture people, murder people, and they will create wars. They will create suppression of truth. The role of religion and sex causes many heavy conflicts, and the believers of these religions will have much hate. Every religion is hostile to other religions. And believers that meet in church services, they eventually end up clashing. And this will occur in India. We will see the clash between the Hindu and the Islamic religions. All religions and sects are hostile to other religions and sects. And this will cause murder, death, as Billy says, Gewalt, because the believers of the religions actually hate each other. In many countries, this will continue to occur more and more. And the young people will fall prey to the sectarian preachers of hate. And the young people will, because they don't know what, they have no background of knowledge, so they will fall prey to the sectarian religious leaders. And you see many of the social justice warriors today are a step away from becoming terrorists, because they just don't have the background knowledge to understand the bigger picture. So in other words, as we had studied from the Mind of Thoughts, it's the incomplete ideas that cause the turmoil in the psyche, and these incomplete ideas cause us to have misdirected thoughts which go from one extreme to the other. So that was the first part of the show. I wanted to cover these. This is some new stuff that came from Figo related to Svath's meeting with Billy, and that was in 1946. I think it was May 5th. And that's been around for a little while now. I just haven't really talked about it. I want to try to talk a little bit about the New World Order now. There's so much to study when it comes to the New World Order. Let's start out with symbols in the ancient world. The symbol of the zodiac is divided into 4 areas that are separated by a cross. And the cross is also the symbol of the Christian church. And before there was Christianity, we had an endless stream of deities that had their birthday on December 25th. And around December 21st or 22nd, we have the lowest point of the sun cycle in the year. That's called the winter solstice. So that's where the sun is at its lowest journey. And on December 25th, the sun is said to be born again. So the birth of the Jesus Christ figure coincides with the winter solstice. And someone argued that Christianity, in its current form, really resulted from a sun-worshipping emperor named Constantine. And this is why Jesus is given the birthday of December 25th. And in many ways, the story of Christ is symbolic of the story of the sun. By Easter, the sun enters into the sign of the ram or the lamb. And in the pre-Christian world, they would sacrifice lambs. Sacrificing the lambs to the gods was said to bring good luck. So Christianity, in many ways, is symbolic of the sun. So what do Billy and Ptah have to say about religions? Well, Billy brings up the fact that many earth people are simply very focused on religious faith concerning everything that is just. Let me read what Billy says here. I'm thinking, for example, of rebirth and of what is maintained and erroneously taught in relation to this, that the personality becomes reincarnated, although this is not the case. Because after the death of the body, the personality is dissolved by the consciousness block. So what happens, of course, as we've talked about many times before, it's your spirit form, your spiritual consciousness that reincarnates over and over again. The spiritual consciousness absorbs the consciousness block, the material consciousness, in the realm of the beyond. There's the previous personality, the subconscious, the unconscious. The conscious mind go into what's called the overall consciousness block, which is like a storage area in the world of pure spirit, and then the spirit form goes back through the previous personality's experiences, and it gets the evolutive values from those experiences, the love, the logic, the wisdom, the confidence, the enthusiasm. All those basic things that were learned from the previous life are then stored in these evolutive values. They're absorbed by the spirit form, and the spirit form then becomes strengthened and more knowledgeable through each reincarnation. So the religions that do understand reincarnation do not understand it supposedly in the way that it should be understood. And Ptah says to Billy, people are infected with such delusional beliefs because every religious or sectarian faith enslaves everything in the world of apprehension, the world of thought, the world of feeling of the person, and evokes a certain obsession in such a way that reason becomes turned off. And I've noticed this, that the more you're involved in religion, the more reason is turned off, and it becomes completely devoid of any purpose. So clear logic doesn't work anymore. Religion has a way of turning off clear logic. Religion, as this is common on the earth peoples, is like a vicious drug which disrupts and kills both intellect and reason. And people who have fallen victim to a religious or even a sectarian faith are not only unpredictable in their unreasonableness, they give themselves over and into the hands of the responsibility of an imaginary deity who should direct everything for them. Remember, Maya information says we are responsible for ourselves, everything that we think, everything that we do. We are responsible. The creational natural laws dictate what happens, the law of cause and effect, the law of reincarnation, the laws, the primary law of love, the law of striving, the law of harmonious thinking, the law of population, that a planet our size should only have about 1 billion people, 500 million between there somewhere. These are the laws of nature. And as the Maya information explains, there is no religious deity and no God in the sense that the religions teach. Now the sun continues to be kind of a religious symbol, as does the lamb that was supposed to die for our sins. The person of the sun is symbolized as an individual with long golden hair that becomes an old man during the late winter, and who is a baby in the time of the winter solstice, just before December 25th. And at the peak of the summer, he's symbolic of the sun as the long hair, and this is the time when Samson was very strong, when he had very long hair. And this is much like the Samson story in the Bible. And this comes from older stories. Much of what's in the Bible is a reflection of older stories that come from other cultures. Let me talk quickly about something called the original sin. And this was discussed in Contact 251. I want to move back towards the New World Order. That's kind of what I'm trying to get back to. I just want to hit a few quick things. We are considered the genetically manipulated people. And this is a long story. Much of us are descended from the people from Lyra Vega that moved to the Seer system, and they genetically engineered this tendency for fighting out of themselves. They created a sub-branch of their own humanity with a shortened lifespan and an increased tendency towards warfare. And that's kind of where we are. Let me continue here. It says, the characteristic has been an evil legacy for mankind from early times. And they also have actually been called the original sin. Information regarding the original sin was erroneously handed down by Christian religions as the fable of Adam and Eve and the devilish snake in the Garden of Eden. This original sin, however, in reality was a genetic manipulation which left us with an obsession for fighting, and yet in fact this entire matter is based on the manipulation of a single DNA gene that will eventually be rectified, and our geneticists will finally discover it. The genetic manipulation, a characteristic for all living human beings on Earth, it will be eventually reversed. This propensity for fighting is one of the ways we are manipulated by the global elite, by the New World Order. This is the group Billy calls the Secret Dark Order. For example, the NATO symbol is similar to the cross and the sun of the zodiac. The NATO is a subsidiary of the group that runs the world. The City of London is the center of the global cabal. The symbol for the CIA is also a sun and cross symbol, but in a slightly different form than NATO. There's another symbol called the black sun, and the black sun is the symbol of the star at the center of our galaxy. This global elite have passed down a very advanced knowledge from generation to generation. It's always been hidden. I wonder if the Illuminati that we talk about now are actually related directly to the Giza intelligences that I've talked about time and time again on the show here. Even the design of our cities use this symbol. London and Washington, D.C. are a huge mass of symbols and sacred geometry. The Arc de Triomphe in France is another one of these symbols. The Order of Knights Templar also has the cross going through the crown, just like the zodiac. These Christian symbols, these symbols appear on Christian churches. So we have these symbols that are used to speak to our subconscious. Fear is one of the ways the global elite manipulates us. Kind of like sheep, we are pushed around by fear. And the other aspect of control that is taking place is the manipulation of our consciousness, keeping us imprisoned in our ignorance. There's a vast amount of knowledge that is being hidden from the people of the world, and there's a tiny amount of people at the top of the pyramid that are holding on to this knowledge. The Maya writings release the important spiritual knowledge that you need to evolve your consciousness. And I've heard of a guy that works for the CIA and a fellow that has this patch attached to his body. He's completely dependent on a drug now. His body was manipulated into being dependent on this drug, and now he has to keep working for the CIA because just a few days off this drug will kill him. This is the way this global elite rules the world. There's a group within the ancient societies, again, that has fantastic knowledge. We have different races here on the earth, and there is a long story about the origin of these different races, and sometime we'll have to go back into that. But I want to cover quickly, in about 5 more minutes, a little bit more information on the New World Order. This is a secret global elite that Billy talks about, the secret dark order. Billy describes it as they want to take away our rights of self-determination. They are in control of all the money and the power, and they are making the people of the earth indolent and obtuse through the use of the media, through cell phones, and various other things. This conspiracy, this global elite, wants a world government which will dictate all policy in every country. They want a world central bank which will dictate global finance. They want a world currency with no money, just no physical money, just entries in a computer. They want a world army to impose the will of the world government. They want a microchip population, and that gives them direct access to your mentality, so they can change your feelings, change your thoughts, turn you on or off, so to speak. And this is what we're up against. They want super states. The people of the earth they're being assaulted right now. And we have puppets, political puppets that come forward. Perhaps Trump is a political puppet. I'm sure Hillary was. Again, the elites plan for the future. They want a fascist state, a world government, a cashless society, an Orwellian state. And George Orwell identified this state as a destruction of free and open society, a brutal policy of control enforced by propaganda, surveillance, misinformation, denial of the truth, manipulation of the past. Again, on this microchip population, a fellow named Aaron Russo stated that the elites want a world government that is run by the bankers, and everyone is going to have an RFID chip. All money will be related to the chip. So the elite will just take the money out of your account if they desire. They want us to be slaves. The elite government wants to have total control. And this fellow named Aaron Russo met with one of the Rockefellers. About a year before the attack on the World Trade Center, Aaron met with one of the Rockefellers, her female attorney. And this particular Rockefeller was a very smart man. He explained that they wanted to invade Afghanistan, and they talked about many things. Billy also talks about microchipping, and Billy brings it up in Figu Bulletin number 2, and he brings it up in a relationship to the deep space monitoring system. America has taken the first step toward a horrifying futuristic vision of total control of every human being on Earth. And this means that you will not be able to take a single step without being observed and controlled by an all-inclusive monitoring system that would eventually entail the implanting of a coded chip into every person. The insiders call the monitoring system the Deep Space Platform. These are satellites which orbit and are looking at everything. There's something called the Project for the New American Century, which talked about invading a whole series of countries and changing the rulers of those countries, just to name a few of them. Iraq, Libya, Syria, Afghanistan, Lebanon, Somalia, Sudan, probably other ones. Supposedly these wars, particularly World War III, which was supposed to be the last one, the next big world war. And when I say World War III, I mean the next world war. Some say World War II is actually World War III. That's another story. But supposedly, way back in the time of the Civil War, a guy named Albert Pike was one of these Illuminati that had all these world wars planned out. So we'll have to wait and see. So we have some very difficult challenges in front of us, but I think eventually we will win out. The Meyer material explains that we will win out in all of this. So I want to go and switch gears back to the Might of Thoughts book and start back at a very simple concept. And these are what I call the characteristics of neutral positive thought. And you should be confident, optimistic, cheerful, relaxed, enthusiastic, thankful, harmony. You should have a sense of persistence, perseverance. You should have a sense of endurance, of calmness, of being satisfied. Much of our negative thinking comes from a lack of confidence, self-doubt, and anxiety. And I can still remember times in my life when I was plagued by self-doubt. Telling yourself that you're confident, you can start to break the cycle of negative thinking. We have to gain control of our anxiety so it doesn't control us. And this requires us to understand the unknown. And this is one of the big important aspects of getting control of anxiety, is coming control of the unknown and generating cheerfulness in your thinking. Cheerfulness is a quality or state of being happy and optimistic. Cheerfulness dispels gloom. And Billy has a book called Meditation from Clear Visibility. It says, I feel joy's testimony within myself, and I feel it with cheerfulness, diligence, and indefatigability. So we're told to maintain contact with human beings who are pleasant and harmonious. And this fact is important. We should be strong, knowledgeable, wise, peace, joyous, open. We should have practical experiences that are based on love and respect. We should be calm. Remember, calm and cheerfulness is a really important part of neutral positive thinking. So you're not showing nervousness and you're not showing anger or other emotions. Calmness is supposed to help you build tranquility and quiet. Calm was mentioned by Svath when Billy was first meeting with Svath. Svath told Billy, learn to control yourself in these things and always remain calm, because that is the best weapon and the best defense against any attack. One thing to remember, that the change always begins with the individual. And in your striving, you will be forced to do things that you didn't think you would ever have to do, that you shouldn't have to do. But in fact, there will be things that you will do. Cheerfulness is a critical part of neutral positive thinking. The cheerfulness in a live form is more valuable for the human being than gold, platinum, or diamonds. True cheerfulness is a circumstance of life which is based in the ocean of truth, in which waves endlessly keep everything in motion. They preserve calmness and peace deep below, beyond the touch of the storms. So we should focus on making a life of joy instead of being negative. Again, two important concepts: perseverance, which means not giving up, steadfastness, being continuing in spite of difficulty, is persistence. In the Meditation from Clear Visibility book, it says, that is the nature of his or her own personality, in that he determines and forms it according to his or her own will, which is why it can be fundamentally different to the real innermost spiritual nature. So we have the external nature, the internal nature, and the innermost spiritual nature, which is related to your spirit form. Optimism is another important aspect of neutral positive thinking. And optimism represents a quality which fascinates people. If you're optimistic, people will be fascinated with you. Optimism is hopefulness and confidence about the future. So we have to be confident about the future. Despite some unknowns we have to face, optimistic behavior enables a human being to see and acknowledge the clear truth even in the worst situation. Each person must first acquire an optimistic attitude solely for himself, and from this will initially result the progressive expansion through his fellow men. People will want to be optimistic when they are exposed to your optimism. All hopes for true progress exist only when they start by yourself. In other words, you have to find your place, make your niche, do your thing. And again, you'll be surprised how much initiative you will have to have. And this is, we're back to page 244 in The Might of the Thoughts. And I want to read for you this little passage that we've been talking about for weeks and weeks. Therefore, it is necessary to search for the source of the life power and to develop it in order to have reliable life potential upon which one can depend, therefore in which one can completely trust. The source of your life power, the word life power is the German word Lebenskraft, and this life force or life power actually in many ways determines how long we live. And it's based, believe it or not, on our thoughts, on our consciousness. And we're told to search for the source of our life power. And this life power is certain neutral positive thoughts which radiate in our consciousness. And we are told to search for the source of the life power and develop it. And the German word here is Quelle, which is source. The life power is the Lebenskraft. The source of the life power, which, in fact, and this is another shocker for me, these verses have been a total shocker for me. Anyway, the source of the life power, which must be created by oneself, which is astonishing to me, lies in the consciousness, that is to say, in its thoughts, which must be formed, tended, and nurtured in such a way that they correspond to an intention, an ideal. Remember, an idea, I-D-E-A, is an incomplete, unripe, immature, underdeveloped thought which can lead to emotional extremes, murder, manslaughter, can lead to all kinds of misery. Can lead to a rotation of your thoughts, a compulsive thinking of wrong thoughts. And this is because ideas, I-D-E-A-S, are filled with unvalues. What do I mean by unvalues? We'll have to review that in a minute, but there are certain ideas which are very destructive, and we sometimes hold on to these ideas and don't want to let them go. And some of these ideas can cause great problems. For example, Unvalues can be a lack of logical decisions, a lack of rational conduct, frequent change of sexual partners, boredom, parasitism, manipulative behavior, a sense of unfairness. So I think about unfairness and boredom for a while as an aspect of an idea rather than an ideal, I-D-E-A-L. And I have to constantly tell myself the importance of just being neutral about everything, being even neutral about this show, being neutral even about a loved one who could be in trouble. You have to be neutral. It's very, very difficult because if you take an idea, which is an incomplete thought, and you become non-neutral, then you can have tangled ideas that confuse the thoughts. You abruptly go from one extreme to another. So the Wenn wir Ideen is, I think, a German phrase which says, when tangled ideas. And the word wir appears in Contact Report 115, and it could mean jumbled, scattered, confused. And this is brought up in terms of jealousy and egoism, which occurred in Billy's group. And Quetzal was talking to Billy about some of the internal strife within the group. And Quetzal had a beautiful thing to say about love. And he said, love is neither a privilege nor a right of possession, but rather an acquired understanding and sincere feeling of harmony and recognition of the solidarity and well-beings of one's neighbors. And Quetzal talked about this in terms of these tangled ideas that were occurring in the group. And he said erroneous and confused thoughts arise, and these degenerate into rather extreme forms, and in the incomprehensible notion that you could fall in love with one and not another, and that Billy was showing favoritism or something. Well, this word wir in confusion is also related to belief and faith. This is an article that was called Belief and Faith that Billy wrote. It says, when no reason can be seen for something, not only does the individual believer hold himself, but usually all believers in God hold themselves to the belief that the corresponding incomprehensible events were the work and will of God as a world mover and a fate mover, which would simply have to be accepted. And they think that their lives follow a well-thought-out and God-given destiny, to which they are given because their idea of a higher order purpose and destiny calms them down. In this way, the life focused on a God gives meaning to the believer. But this is extremely deceptive. But through this deceptive sense of life, the believing person is given a wrong meaning in a confused structure. So you're giving your responsibility away when it's really you. You are the master of your own destiny. You are the forger of your own fortune. Your good thoughts create good feelings. Your good feelings create good habits. And your good habits build good circumstances in your life. What you think, you make real. What you think about yourself, you become. The religions do not teach this. It's very, very important. You are the master of your own destiny. Your consciousness should be like a garden filled with flourishing plants. Just another article quickly, and this is the importance of controlling your thoughts. And this is an article on concentration, meditation, and sleep. When you're about to fall asleep, try to focus on the good and the positive and cultivate these thoughts and feelings. And then your sleep will be balanced and your dreams will express themselves in virtuous thoughts and feelings. So cultivate concentrative and controlled virtuous thoughts and feelings in a meditative way before going to sleep, because these other thoughts can trigger emotions, which even can lead to murder and manslaughter. So it's very important to always monitor your thoughts. Your thoughts control and influence so many things. For example, your life power. And one of the most interesting things is the mental fluido energies that come from your thoughts. And these mental fluido energies charge the things around you. And these fluido energies are the personal emanations. And it's called the swinging wave in the Maya information. And these are the energies of human beings. It comes through your thoughts and your feelings. And the swinging waves contain the character of the human being, the movements of his consciousness. And these powers, they settle into your skeleton, they emanate out through the consciousness. The mental swinging waves are deposited in objects, books, clothing, jewelry, and they settle into things around you. They settle into your skeleton, and this is one of the reasons you shouldn't be cremated. That skeleton in the ground will help your spirit form in another lifetime, this kind of back connection. The character of the human being is actually deposited into objects around him. And the swinging waves associated to your personality, your psyche, your feelings, and your thoughts are transmitted, for example, into the books that you have, into the furniture, into your clothing. And you may have a piece of clothing that you've thought a lot of good thoughts in. And if you put that sweatshirt on or whatever it is, it can generate, you can remember, oh, I remember when I felt that way. Boy, that was a really positive energy. And this is why it's important not to move a whole lot, because you're depositing your energies, your fluido energies into the books, into the furniture, into the trees, and the plants, animals around you. And this is your sense of home. And that can have a positive effect on you. And again, the back connection is the connection back to the earlier life. When you go into a house, you can feel attractive or repelled because there are all these swinging waves associated to the people that lived in that house. The more unstable the person is, the more likely they are impacted by the negative swinging waves. You actually, through your thoughts, create a fluido immune system around your body. And it puts the human being in their own little world. This mental fluido energy can make a back connection to previous lives. And it can make a back connection to a skeleton that's in the ground from a previous life. So the skeleton contains fluido powers associated with previous life, and a person can draw information and power from the earlier life. Old memories, they can be positive or negative. Some of the old problems you connect back to. And they'll be there as long as you need them. And we can have impulses that come out of storage banks, which our subconsciousness connects with. And this is a kind of evolutive help. This back connection can allow the human being to draw subconscious information out of the past. And it's subconscious. The human being can get relief from issues by this back connection. Much of the efforts come, again, through the subconsciousness. The human being always has multiple back connections to the previous lives. And these impulses from the previous life can be held for practically an eternity in the storage banks. And they will strike you over and over again as long as you need them. And the evolution sometimes, when you evolve, you will not require this back connection as much anyway. And this is what causes what looks like spiritual apparitions. sometimes the fluidal energies can create what are called spiritual apparitions. Again, don't destroy your skeleton through cremation, because your subconsciousness will not be able to back connect to that skeleton of the previous life. It's the body and the skeleton that is the most important power associated with the fluidal energies. So we should not be cremated, because this destroys the skeleton, which contains the most intense concentration of the mental fluidal powers. And those are how we have the back connection to the previous life. Again, also do not move from one place to another all the time, because that disrupts your connections to the local area. That doesn't mean you shouldn't move when it's time. I think it's very important to move if you're in the wrong place. But understand that you're looking for a place that you can have connections with these fluidal energies. Okay, what are apparitions? These are nothing but mental fluidal powers which are made mobile by the unconscious and the subconsciousness of the same person. Typically, the person is not aware at all that they are causing these apparitions. This takes place subconsciously mostly. In the United States, at about 4 p.m. every afternoon, the ghost of a child of 10 years old would appear in this house. She would sing and walk around. She would go into the garden, and this child had actually become an old lady that had lived in the same home. And the old lady would nap in her armchair every day around 4 p.m. And during that nap, a strong memory of her childhood would appear as a dream of her living in that house. And this ghost was actually the mental fluidal powers of the old lady that had been stored up in the house over years. They had a similar situation in Hinterschmidruti. In the early years, a shadowy figure would dart around the house and end up making noises in the attics, and they would turn on a light and they would see nothing. So the fluidal energies, there's a difference between the fluidal energies and the pure thought swinging waves. The fluidal energies arise out of what's called the total mental block. The swinging waves have a great power within themselves, but the mental swinging waves, they can be stored, pure thought swinging waves generally, but do not deposit themselves into things, but these mental fluidal powers do. Only the swinging waves that come from the entire mental block will be deposited into things. And churches and monasteries can store negative fluidal powers. I've talked about that a few times. Churches and monasteries are places where these kinds of fluidal powers are stored. So people go in there when many times during funerals, and they all are just overwhelmed with profound grief, or during marriages where everyone is in a very nervous and excited state, and all these unstable energies are stored over long periods of time, and for centuries these fluidal energies, they're in these monasteries, and they contain very strong negative powers that can impact people in very dangerous ways. And a human being that is sensitive to these swinging waves can be very negatively affected by these. The swinging waves, they're stored often in a very degenerated form that can cause great damage to an evolved person. These energies are overpowering to people that are oriented to the truth. However, strong believers will become even more enslaved when they go into these old monasteries. A human being, again, that is oriented to the truth can be greatly damaged by these energies stored in these old monasteries. A person can even be killed by these negative blocks of energy that have been built up for over centuries. Billy was nearly killed by one of these old monasteries in Switzerland. So, fluido energies is a very, very interesting thing. There is some distance aspect to these fluido energies. The greatest distance that they can travel is about 3 light seconds. If you're in cemeteries, typically you don't see that many apparitions, but sometimes they occur. Most of the time, these fluido energies are deeply deposited into the ground, so you don't see anything. This fluido energies is related to your health. And sometimes too intense a cleaning of the body can remove these fluido energies, and that will damage your health. So if you're cleaning too intensely, especially with chemical means, this intense cleaning can weaken your immune system, and the health can be quite damaged. A human being can be vulnerable to sickness this way. So be careful about that. The mental fluido power, it deposits itself into your aura. And the aura, under certain circumstances, can be perceived in a fine-feeling manner. It cannot be seen. But an aura will often trigger sympathy or antipathy. So the aura can trigger repulsion or attraction. I know I've been around people that I was immediately attracted to, other people that I am profoundly repulsed by. This is because deposited into the aura are personality-based and character-based energies. So you never talk to them, but you are repulsed by them. The aura is a coat that flows through the life form and arises out of them. This is the Lebenskraft, the life energy. It's converted into an aura, a fluido energy. The aura flows continually through the body and the spirit form. This auric energy and fluido energy come from the spiritual and the physical body. And this is called the electromagnetic life energy, this cosmic electromagnetic life energy, sometimes has a bluish color. I think people sometimes can see that. I'm not really certain about that. Another thing to be careful of is the transplanting of organs. And I would say this can cause big problems because you are getting the Lebenskraft of another person deposited into your body. And you can take on the characteristics of that other person. This is why an organ is exchanged from one person to another. Also, information associated with that other person is transplanted into you. So you can take on a lot of problems the other person has. Wishes, hopes, and fears are literally transplanted into your body by this new organ. So I would say that transplanting organs is not good. I'm very sorry we have a caller with her hand up. I'm sorry I didn't notice. I'll have to get to you the next time around. Thanks so much for calling in. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the show. My name is Mark Snyder. This is Ohio Exopolitics. Have a great day.